The unassuming estate. The morning mist clings to the Buckinghamshire countryside like a secret refusing to reveal itself. It's August 1939, and if you were to drive past the wrought iron gates of Bletchley Park, you might barely glance at the modest Victorian mansion beyond. The red brick facade shows its age, weathered, unassuming, perhaps even slightly shabby. The kind of estate that whispers of genteel decline rather than world-changing significance. Yet behind those unremarkable walls, history is about to pivot on an axis so precise, so carefully calibrated, that the outcome of the greatest conflict humanity has ever known will hang in the balance. The Government Code and Cipher School, known to insiders simply as GCNCS, has chosen this quiet corner of England for reasons that have nothing to do with grandeur and everything to do with strategic necessity. Captain Ridley of His Majesty's Navy stands in the mansion's main hall, his footsteps echoing against the worn parquet flooring. The ornate ceiling above him bears the scars of decades, water stains mapping territories of neglect, paint peeling like old parchment. He runs his finger along a dusty windowsill and considers the peculiar irony of the moment. Here, in a building that couldn't command respect at a country auction, they're preparing to wage the most sophisticated intelligence war in human history. The estate itself tells a story of English eccentricity. Built in the 1880s by a financier with more money than architectural sense, Bletchley Park represents that particular Victorian enthusiasm for mixing styles with abandon. Gothic revival mingles with Tudor elements. Bay windows jostle for space with mock medieval turrets. The result should be an eyesore, yet somehow achieves a rambling charm that feels almost protective, as if the building's very awkwardness might serve as camouflage for the secrets it will soon harbour. Commander Alistair Denniston, the quiet Scotsman who leads GCNCS, has spent months evaluating potential locations. The requirements were precise, close enough to London for coordination, far enough for security. Excellent rail connections. Bletchley sits at the junction of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway with the London and North Eastern Railway. Telegraph and telephone infrastructure already in place, and perhaps most importantly, inconspicuous, a place where brilliant minds could gather without attracting the wrong kind of attention. The grounds stretch across 55 acres of what was once a working estate. Ancient oak trees stand sentinel along gravel paths that meander between outbuildings and stable blocks. There's a lake, more of a large pond really, where ducks paddle in blissful ignorance of the momentous changes approaching. The head gardener, a man named Jenkins, who's tended these grounds for 30 years, watches the newcomers with polite bewilderment. Government types, he's been told, something to do with the war preparations. He nods respectfully and continues pruning the roses. What Jenkins cannot know, what none of the local residents can possibly imagine, is that within months, this sleepy estate will house the most concentrated collection of intellectual firepower ever assembled for a single purpose. Mathematicians from Cambridge and Oxford, chess champions and crossword puzzle experts, linguists who dream in ancient languages, debutantes whose finishing school educations concealed razor-sharp analytical minds. They will arrive by train and bicycle, carrying suitcases and secrets, transforming this genteel backwater into the beating heart of Allied intelligence. But that transformation lies ahead. Today, in the dying days of peace, Bletchley Park still belongs to the old world. The mansion's library holds leather-bound volumes on subjects that seem quaint. Treatises on estate management, collections of Victorian poetry, hunting journals filled with meticulous records of long-ago shoots. The morning room retains its original wallpaper, faded roses climbing endless trellises toward a ceiling painted the color of forget-me-nots. Mrs. Travis, the housekeeper who came with the property, moves through these rooms with the authority of long familiarity. She's been warned that changes are coming. Many more people, irregular hours, work of a sensitive nature. The details remain vague, wrapped in the kind of official discretion that suggests importance without revelation. She's arranged for additional staff from the village. Young women mostly, reliable girls who can be trusted with discretion even if they don't understand what they're being discreet about. The stable block presents particular possibilities. Solid brick construction, easily divided into smaller spaces. The haylofts could be converted into offices, the horse stalls transformed into workshops. There's something almost poetic about the prospect. Where thoroughbreds once waited for morning rides, machines of an entirely different breed will soon click and whir through the night. The transformation will require imagination, but then imagination has never been in short supply among the minds gathering for this extraordinary endeavor. Young Alan Turing has already visited twice, walking the grounds with the measured pace of a man solving problems in his head. At 27, he possesses the kind of mathematical brilliance that operates on frequencies most minds cannot detect. His colleagues at King's College know him as eccentric, brilliant, certainly, but given to odd habits and unconventional thinking. What they cannot yet comprehend is that unconventional thinking will prove to be exactly what this war demands. The village of Bletchley itself maintains the rhythms of rural England. The local pub, the Eight Bells, serves warm beer to farmers and railway workers who discuss weather and wages with equal seriousness. The postmaster sorts mail with methodical precision, noting the recent increase in correspondence addressed to the park. Official-looking envelopes bearing government francs. Nothing unusual in itself. Great houses often conduct business with London. Still, there's a subtle shift in the air. The kind of change that registers in a community's collective unconscious long before it reaches conscious awareness. At the railway station, the station master has received quiet instructions about certain passengers who will be arriving in the coming weeks. No fanfare, no special arrangements, simply a heightened awareness of who passes through his domain. The 847 from London has begun carrying an unusual number of well-dressed individuals who seem oddly interested in the local countryside. They carry briefcases and speak in measured tones, their conversations stopping abruptly when strangers approach. The local telephone exchange, housed in a modest building on the high street, has been quietly upgraded. New cables, additional capacity, improvements that seem disproportionate to the community's needs. Miss Patterson, the chief operator, has worked these switchboards for 15 years. She recognizes the signs of expansion, the preparation for significantly increased traffic. When asked, she simply nods and mentions something about wartime preparations. The details, she's been told, are not for discussion. Back at the estate, the mansion's dining room has been cleared of its heavy Victorian furniture. The long mahogany table that once hosted shooting parties and family gatherings now stands empty, waiting for a very different kind of assembly. The portraits on the walls, stern-faced ancestors of the estate's previous owners, gaze down with expressions that seem to anticipate the gravity of what's to come. Their world of country house weekends and seasonal social rituals is ending, replaced by something far more urgent and infinitely more consequential. The morning sun streams through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across floors that will soon echo with footsteps of a very different rhythm. Not the measured pace of country life, but the urgent tempo of minds racing against time. The shadows themselves seem to hold their breath, as if the building understands that its quiet decades of genteel decline are about to give way to a period of intensity that will define its legacy forever. In London, the final preparations are underway. Files are being packed, equipment prepared for transport, personnel briefed on their new assignments. The word Bletchley appears in classified memoranda with increasing frequency, though always in contexts that reveal nothing of its true significance. To the outside world, it remains simply a place name, a dot on the map between London and Birmingham, where trains pause briefly before continuing their journeys. The irony is perfect in its simplicity. In an age where nations will spend vast fortunes on obvious displays of military might, battleships and bombers, tanks and artillery, some of the war's most decisive victories will emerge from this unprepossessing mansion, where the greatest weapon will be human intellect applied with methodical precision. As evening approaches on this late summer day in 1939, Bletchley Park settles into what may be its last quiet night for many years to come. The ducks on the lake tuck their heads beneath their wings, the ancient oaks rustle with the whispered secrets of centuries, and in the mansion itself, empty rooms wait in patient darkness for the extraordinary minds that will soon transform them into the most important workplace in the Allied war effort. The stage is set, though the actors have yet to arrive, and the drama that will unfold here will reshape the very nature of warfare itself. Hannah. Huts of Secrets. September 3rd, 1939. The declaration echoes across Britain's airwaves at 11:15 in the morning. This country is now at war with Germany. Within hours, the first lorries begin arriving at Bletchley Park, their engines coughing diesel smoke into the crisp autumn air. The quiet estate that had dozed through its final peaceful night now awakens to purpose. The transformation is immediate and chaotic. What had been empty rooms just days before suddenly teem with activity. Desks appear as if by magic, followed by filing cabinets, typewriters, and miles of telephone cable. The mansion's elegant drawing rooms, once designed for leisurely conversation over tea, now echo with the urgent clatter of machinery and the hushed conversations of people who cannot speak of their work. But it's not in the mansion itself where the real work begins. Behind the main building, construction crews work around the clock, hammering together what will become the most famous temporary structures in intelligence history. Hut 1, Hut 2, Hut 3. Simple wooden buildings, hastily erected, with corrugated iron roofs and walls so thin that conversations in one room can be heard in the next. These huts, they're not much to look at. Imagine a collection of garden sheds, really, but longer and wider. The kind of buildings you might find housing equipment at a railway depot. Nothing about them suggests they will house some of the most brilliant minds of their generation. Nothing hints that within these humble walls, the course of world history will be altered. Hut 6 becomes the domain of the Army and Air Force Enigma sections. Step inside, and you're immediately struck by how cramped it feels. The ceiling is low, the lighting harsh and artificial. Rows of wooden tables stretch from wall to wall, each one covered with papers, pencils, and the mysterious mechanical contraptions that will become the tools of this new kind of warfare. The people arriving to fill these huts, they're unlike any military unit ever assembled. Professor Gordon Welchman, a mathematician from Cambridge, peers through wire-rimmed spectacles at intercepts that look like meaningless jumbles of letters. Beside him, a young woman who just months ago was teaching Latin to schoolchildren now applies her knowledge of language patterns to German military communications. The diversity is extraordinary. Chess masters sit alongside linguists. Crossword puzzle champions work next to professors of ancient Greek. There's a concert pianist whose ability to recognize patterns in Bach fugues proves invaluable in detecting the repetitive structures hidden in encrypted messages. A classics scholar who can recite Homer from memory finds herself using those same memorization skills to track the subtle variations in German radio procedures. And at the center of it all, the Enigma machine itself. Picture a typewriter, but one designed by someone with a peculiar sense of mechanical artistry. Above the keyboard, 3 rotors sit in a row, each one inscribed with the 26 letters of the alphabet. These rotors are the heart of Enigma's security. Each time an operator presses a key, the rotors advance, changing the encryption pattern. The same letter pressed twice will produce 2 completely different encrypted results, but that's only the beginning of Enigma's complexity. Below the keyboard lies the plugboard, a maze of cables that can be connected in millions of different combinations. Each cable swaps 2 letters before they even reach the rotors, so the letter A might become F at the plugboard, then be scrambled again by the first rotor, then the second, then the third, before being reflected back through the entire system in reverse. The mathematics are staggering. With 3 rotors chosen from a set of 5, arranged in any order, with each rotor starting at any of 26 positions, and with the plugboard set to any of its billions of possible configurations, the total number of possible Enigma settings exceeds 150 million. 150 million. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. It's a figure so large that if you could test one setting every second, it would take you longer than the age of the universe to try them all. And yet, here in these hastily built huts, brilliant minds are convinced they can crack it. The early days are filled with frustration. Intercept operators, hunched over radio receivers in listening stations scattered across Britain, capture German transmissions and send them by motorcycle courier to Bletchley. The messages arrive as strings of 5-letter groups. QPWKA LXMND FGHR TYUIO. Meaningless, absolutely meaningless to anyone who doesn't possess the key. In Hut 6, small groups gather around tables covered with these intercepts. They try everything: statistical analysis of letter frequency, searches for repeated patterns, attempts to guess at common German military phrases that might appear in the messages. Nichts zu melden. Nothing to report. Surely that phrase appears regularly in routine military communications. But Enigma resists every conventional approach. The machine's designers understood frequency analysis. They knew that codebreakers would look for patterns. Enigma was specifically designed to eliminate the very clues that had made previous codes vulnerable. Days pass, then weeks. The intercepts pile up, unread. Meanwhile, German forces are advancing across Poland. The Blitzkrieg is demonstrating a new kind of warfare, coordinated by radio communications that remain completely opaque to Allied intelligence. The pressure is immense, though it's rarely spoken of directly. Everyone in the huts understands what's at stake. British merchant ships are being torpedoed by U-boats that coordinate their attacks through Enigma encrypted messages. German bombers are receiving targeting information that arrives in the same impenetrable 5-letter groups that cover the desks at Bletchley. But gradually, small breakthroughs begin to emerge. The first insights come not from the messages themselves, but from understanding how the Germans use their communication systems. Traffic analysis, it's called. Even if you can't read the messages, you can learn from studying who sends them, when they're sent, how long they are, and what patterns emerge in the radio networks. A young linguist notices that certain call signs appear regularly at the beginning of transmission periods. A mathematician observes that message lengths cluster around specific numbers, perhaps corresponding to standard military report formats. A former postal worker, accustomed to sorting mail by recognizing address patterns, begins to identify which German units are communicating with which headquarters, even without understanding a word of the content. These observations create the foundation for more sophisticated attacks. If you know that a message is probably a weather report, sent at the same time each day, using roughly the same format, then you have what cryptographers call a crib, a guess about what the plaintext might contain. But even with cribs, Enigma remains formidable. The sheer number of possible settings means that testing each one by hand would take forever. What's needed is a way to eliminate vast numbers of possibilities quickly, focusing human effort only on the most promising candidates. This is where the true genius of Bletchley begins to emerge, not in individual brilliance, though there's plenty of that, but in collaboration. The mathematician who understands the theoretical vulnerabilities in Enigma's design works alongside the linguist who can spot the subtle patterns in German military language. The engineer who can build mechanical testing devices collaborates with the crossword solver who has an intuitive feel for letter patterns. In Hut 8, a separate team tackles naval Enigma, an even more challenging variant used by German U-boats. The stakes here are particularly high. Britain depends on merchant convoys for survival, and U-boats are sinking ships faster than they can be replaced. If the naval Enigma traffic could be broken, convoy routes could be adjusted to avoid the wolf packs. But naval Enigma uses 4 rotors instead of 3, multiplying the complexity by another factor of 26. Worse, the German Navy changes its settings more frequently and follows stricter communication procedures that provide fewer clues for codebreakers. The working conditions in all the huts are challenging. The buildings were designed for temporary use, and it shows. In winter, small coal stoves provide inadequate heating, leaving everyone bundled in coats and scarves while they work. In summer, the corrugated iron roofs turn the huts into ovens. The blackout regulations mean that windows must be covered completely, creating a perpetual sense of working in artificial twilight. Privacy is non-existent. Conversations carry through the thin walls. The constant clatter of typewriters and mechanical calculators creates a background noise that never stops. People work in shifts around the clock, so there's always someone arriving as someone else leaves. Always the sound of footsteps on wooden floors, always the murmur of voices discussing problems that cannot be shared with anyone outside these walls. And yet, something remarkable is happening here. A new kind of intellectual community is forming. People who might never have met in peacetime, the Cambridge Don and the London secretary, the Scottish engineer and the Welsh schoolteacher, find themselves united by shared challenges that push the boundaries of human knowledge. They develop their own language, their own customs, their own ways of thinking about problems that have never existed before. They learn to work with mechanical aids that extend human reasoning power. They discover techniques for organizing collaborative attacks on problems too complex for any individual mind to solve alone. Most importantly, they begin to achieve results. Small successes at first, a day's worth of messages decoded, revealing routine administrative traffic. Then larger breakthroughs, entire networks mapped, operational patterns understood, tactical intelligence extracted in time to be useful. The huts are becoming something unprecedented in human history, a factory for secrets, where the raw material of intercepted signals is processed through human intelligence and mechanical ingenuity to produce the finished product of enemy intentions laid bare. And this is still just the beginning. And the bomb and the breaking of Enigma. By early 1940, the breakthrough patterns emerging from those cramped huts had revealed both the immense potential and the crushing limitations of their methods. Yes, they could break Enigma, sometimes, on certain days, with particular luck, but the manual processes, the laborious checking of possible wheel positions, the painstaking reconstruction of rotor settings, it was taking too long. In warfare, intelligence has a half-life. Today's intercepted message about tomorrow's attack becomes useless the moment tomorrow arrives. The codebreakers at Bletchley were winning individual battles against Enigma, but they were losing the war against time itself. Alan Turing understood this with crystalline clarity. Standing in Hut 8 on a grey February morning, surrounded by sheets of partially decoded German naval traffic, he could see the mathematical elegance of a solution that didn't yet exist. What they needed wasn't just human brilliance. They needed to mechanize that brilliance. The concept had been brewing in his mind since his arrival at Bletchley. The Polish cryptographers had given them the foundation with their original bomber machine, but that device had been overwhelmed when the Germans added complexity to Enigma. What Turing envisioned was something far more sophisticated, a machine that could think through possibilities at superhuman speed. He called it the bomb. The name carried forward from the Polish device, but Turing's conception was revolutionary. Where human codebreakers might test dozens of possible Enigma settings in a day, his machine could test thousands. Where fatigue and error crept into human calculations, the machine would maintain relentless, perfect consistency. But conceiving such a device and building it were entirely different challenges. The mathematics alone were staggering. Enigma's security rested on its astronomical number of possible configurations. 3 rotors, each with 26 positions, a plugboard with billions of possible connection patterns, the reflector adding another layer of scrambling. The total number of possible keys approached 159 million. Even for a machine, that represented an impossible search space, unless you could find ways to eliminate vast swaths of impossibility. This is where Turing's genius truly shone. He realized that the codebreakers didn't need to test every possible setting. They needed to exploit Enigma's own characteristics against itself. The key insight involved what cryptographers call cribs, predictable elements in German messages, weather reports that always began with Wetter, submarine communications that invariably started with position coordinates, administrative messages with standard military formatting. If you knew a piece of plaintext and had its encrypted equivalent, you could use that knowledge to dramatically narrow the search space. The bomb would test potential Enigma settings against these cribs, rejecting thousands of impossibilities in seconds, homing in on the handful of genuine possibilities. But translating this mathematical insight into mechanical reality required another kind of genius entirely. Gordon Welchman, working alongside Turing, brought the practical engineering vision that would make the bomb feasible. Where Turing saw the mathematical relationships, Welchman saw the mechanical systems that could embody those relationships. The machine they designed together was unlike anything that had ever existed. Picture a bronze-colored cabinet, about 6 feet high and 7 feet long, humming with quiet mechanical purpose. Inside, 36 rotating drums, each one simulating an Enigma rotor, each one connected to its neighbors through a maze of electrical circuits. The drums would spin through possible positions while electrical impulses raced through the connections, testing logical relationships, seeking the unique combination that would satisfy all the constraints simultaneously. When contradictions emerged, when a potential setting failed to match the known crib, the machine would reject that pathway and continue searching. The first prototype emerged from the British Tabulating Machine Company in March 1940. Harold "Doc" Keane, the chief engineer, had somehow translated Turing's theoretical specifications into brass and steel and electrical circuits. The machine represented a marriage of pure mathematics and precision engineering that pushed the boundaries of what was mechanically possible. But would it work? The initial tests were both thrilling and frustrating. The machine could indeed process potential Enigma settings at unprecedented speed. The drums rotated with hypnotic precision, the electrical circuits sparked with purpose, and occasionally, very occasionally, the machine would stop. A stop meant a potential solution, a configuration of rotors and plugboard settings that satisfied the mathematical constraints. But early stops often proved to be false positives, settings that worked for the test crib but failed when applied to the broader message. The refinement process consumed months of meticulous adjustment. Welchman developed innovations like the diagonal board, which dramatically improved the machine's ability to distinguish genuine solutions from mathematical coincidences. Turing refined the logical processes, finding ways to build stronger constraints into the testing procedures. By late summer 1940, as the Battle of Britain raged overhead, the bomb was beginning to prove itself. The first truly successful break was almost anticlimactic. A routine German naval message, intercepted by the listening stations, fed into the machine along with a weather report crib. The bomb ran for 47 minutes, drums spinning, circuits testing, rejecting thousands of impossible combinations. Then it stopped. The operator, a young woman trained in the machine's operation, checked the drum positions and translated them into Enigma settings. She fed a portion of the intercepted message through an Enigma machine configured to those settings. And German plaintext emerged. Not fragments, not partial words requiring inspired guesswork. Complete, coherent German sentences describing weather conditions in the North Sea, submarine patrol assignments, and operational schedules for the following day. The implications hit the code-breaking teams like a physical force. This wasn't just another tactical success. This was the beginning of systematic, reliable penetration of German communications. Word spread through the huts with electric excitement. Mathematicians abandoned their calculations to witness the machine in operation. Linguists gathered around the Enigma machines as German plaintext poured forth. Even the normally reserved Commander Denniston allowed himself a moment of visible satisfaction. But alongside the excitement came a more sobering realization, the weight of responsibility that accompanied such capability. These weren't abstract puzzles anymore. The messages revealed German U-boat positions, convoy attack plans, operational weaknesses that could be exploited. Lives hung in the balance of every successful decryption. Allied convoys could be rerouted away from submarine wolf packs. Royal Navy destroyers could be positioned to intercept German raiders. The ethical dimensions were staggering. How do you act on intelligence without revealing its source? How do you save some lives without sacrificing others to maintain the secret? If the Germans suspected Enigma was compromised, they would change their procedures and the intelligence advantage would vanish. By autumn 1940, additional bombs were arriving at Bletchley Park. Each machine represented months of precision manufacturing, thousands of pounds of investment, and the concentrated expertise of Britain's finest engineers. They were installed in specially constructed buildings, tended by teams of operators who understood their mechanical needs but not their strategic purpose. The machines ran continuously, day and night, processing the steady stream of intercepted German communications. Each successful break revealed more about German operational patterns, communication procedures, and strategic intentions. The intelligence product flowing from Bletchley Park was transforming from a trickle of tactical insights into a river of strategic advantage. But the Germans weren't passive opponents. As 1940 progressed into 1941, Enigma procedures grew more sophisticated. New rotor types appeared. Plugboard protocols became more complex. The naval variant of Enigma proved particularly resistant, requiring entirely new approaches and specialized bomb configurations. Each German innovation demanded British counter-innovation, modified bombs for different Enigma variants, refined techniques for exploiting new types of cribs, expanded manufacturing programs to build enough machines to handle the growing volume of intercepted traffic. The factory for secrets was scaling up, transforming from an experimental workshop into an industrial operation. The bombs represented the heart of this transformation, mechanical minds that could think through mathematical problems at superhuman speed, unlocking enemy secrets with relentless, methodical precision. Standing in the bomb rooms during those autumn nights of 1940, watching the drums rotate through their endless permutations, listening to the quiet mechanical breathing of the machines, you could sense that warfare itself was changing. This was intelligence gathering on an unprecedented scale, powered by a fusion of human insight and mechanical capability that had never existed before. The machines hummed with purpose, processing the raw material of intercepted signals, transforming electromagnetic noise into enemy intentions laid bare. Each successful stop, each decrypted message, each revealed German plan represented another step toward ultimate victory. But that victory remained distant, uncertain, dependent on maintaining the secret that these bronze-colored cabinets held the key to reading German minds. The bombs had proven the concept. Now came the far greater challenge of scaling their success into war-winning advantage. Had Tunny and Colossus. The bombs had proven the concept. Now came the far greater challenge of scaling their success into war-winning advantage. By 1942, as the war reached its most desperate phase, Bletchley Park faced a new and formidable adversary. Deep within the German High Command, a different machine was carrying the most sensitive communications of the Reich. Messages that would never touch an Enigma keyboard. The Germans called it the Schlüsselzusatz, the cipher attachment, but at Bletchley it earned a more whimsical code name, Tunny. Where Enigma served the tactical needs of U-boats and panzer divisions, Tunny carried the strategic thoughts of generals and field marshals. Hitler's personal communications to Rommel in North Africa, detailed assessments of Atlantic Wall fortifications, troop movement orders affecting entire army groups. These were the messages that could reshape the entire course of the war if only they could be read. The challenge was staggering. Tunny didn't rely on rotating wheels like Enigma. Instead, it employed a fiendishly complex system of 12 wheels, each with a different number of pins that could be set in active or inactive positions. The mathematical possibilities weren't merely astronomical. They approached the infinite. A single message might cycle through patterns that would take the fastest bomb months to explore. Colonel John Tiltman, Bletchley's most gifted linguist and cryptanalyst, made the first breakthrough. Working with a German operator's mistake, a repeated message sent with identical settings. Tiltman performed what his colleagues would later call a miracle of pure intellectual determination. For weeks, he sat with sheets of intercepted teleprinter tape, comparing letter frequencies, hunting for patterns that existed only in his mathematical imagination. When Tiltman finally cracked that first message, the implications sent shockwaves through Bletchley's leadership. Here was access to the German strategic mind itself, but only if they could systematize the breaking process. What Tiltman had accomplished through brilliant intuition needed to become routine, mechanical, swift enough to provide intelligence while it remained actionable. The answer would require abandoning everything they thought they knew about code-breaking machines. In a requisitioned corner of F Block, a team of post office engineers led by Tommy Flowers began constructing something that belonged more to science fiction than wartime reality. Where the bombs relied on electromechanical relays, clicking, whirring, fundamentally mechanical in their operation, Flowers envisioned something radically different. Electronic valves, thermionic tubes, the same technology that powered radio sets, but arranged in configurations of unprecedented complexity. His colleagues thought he was mad. Valves were notoriously unreliable. They burned out, overheated, failed without warning. Building a machine that depended on 1,500 of them seemed like engineering suicide. But Flowers understood something his critics missed. The speed of electronic switching would more than compensate for occasional failures. Where mechanical relays operated in milliseconds, electronic valves could switch in microseconds. The machine they built defied every conventional wisdom about wartime engineering. Colossus, for that's what they called it, stood 10 feet high and filled an entire room. 1,500 valves glowed like amber stars across its towering panels. 5 miles of wiring connected components with the precision of a Swiss watch and the power of an industrial dynamo. Paper tape fed through its readers at 30 miles per hour, carrying the intercepted German messages in patterns of holes that represented the deepest secrets of the Reich. But Colossus wasn't merely large, it was revolutionary. This was the world's first programmable electronic digital computer, though that term wouldn't be coined for years. The programs existed as patterns of switches and plugboard connections, instructions that told the machine how to search for the telltale statistical signatures that revealed Tunney's wheel settings. The first time they switched it on, in December 1943, the entire electrical system of Bletchley Park dimmed. Colossus drew the power of a small factory. The valves generated heat that required dedicated cooling systems. The noise, a constant electronic hum punctuated by the rapid chattering of teleprinter output, could be heard 3 buildings away. Yet when it worked, when those amber valves found their rhythm and the paper tape began its high-speed dance through the readers, Colossus could accomplish in hours what would have taken human cryptanalysts months or years. The operators who worked with Colossus were mostly young women, many of them mathematicians recruited from universities across Britain. They learned to program the machine through switch settings and cable connections, creating logical instructions that guided its electronic thinking. These women, Dorothy Dubuisson, Ruth Briggs, Eleanor Ireland, and dozens of others, became the world's first computer programmers, though they would carry that secret for decades. The work required a peculiar combination of mathematical sophistication and mechanical intuition. Understanding why certain switch patterns would reveal Tunney's secrets demanded deep knowledge of statistical analysis and cipher theory. But implementing those insights required the practical skills of an electrician, knowing which cables carried which signals, how to interpret the patterns of lights that indicated the machine's internal state. When a particular combination of clicks and hums meant Colossus was approaching a solution. Each successful run produced what the team called a break, the wheel settings that would unlock an entire day's worth of German high-command traffic. But success was never guaranteed. Sometimes Colossus would run for hours, consuming miles of paper tape and enormous amounts of electrical power, only to produce statistical noise. The German operators occasionally changed their procedures, invalidating weeks of careful analysis. Equipment failures could halt operations for days, while engineers traced faults through miles of wiring. The pressure was extraordinary. Intelligence officers waited anxiously for each day's breaks, knowing that delayed decryption meant missed opportunities. German offensive plans might be revealed too late to influence Allied countermeasures. Troop movements might be completed before countermeasures could be organized. The difference between a break achieved in 6 hours versus 16 hours could be measured in thousands of lives. As 1944 approached, with invasion plans taking final shape, the intelligence flowing from Colossus became absolutely critical. German assessments of Allied deception operations, Hitler's personal views on where the invasion might fall, detailed reports on coastal fortification progress, all of this poured through the Tunney network and increasingly through Colossus's electronic analysis. The machine's capabilities expanded with each modification. By spring 1944, multiple Colossus computers operated in parallel, each tackling different aspects of the Tunney problem. Mark II versions incorporated improved electronics and more sophisticated programming capabilities. The paper tape readers achieved even higher speeds, processing intercepted traffic with mechanical precision that bordered on the supernatural. Yet for all its electronic sophistication, Colossus remained utterly dependent on human insight. The machine could perform millions of statistical calculations, but interpreting the results required deep understanding of German military communications patterns. Recognizing when a partial break might lead to complete success, knowing when to abandon one approach and try another, sensing the subtle indicators that suggested a particular message contained intelligence of unusual importance. These judgments remained irreducibly human. The security surrounding Colossus exceeded even Bletchley's normally paranoid standards. The machines operated in specially constructed rooms with multiple locks and armed guards. Personnel underwent additional background investigations. Even within Bletchley Park, knowledge of Colossus was restricted to those with direct operational need. The official cover story described the machines as advanced tabulating equipment for routine administrative work. This secrecy reflected Colossus's strategic importance, but also its revolutionary nature. Military intelligence services understood code-breaking, but electronic computation belonged to a future that hadn't yet arrived. The implications of programmable electronic machines extended far beyond wartime code-breaking, into realms of possibility that remained largely unexplored. Working with Colossus changed the people who operated it. They were witnessing the birth of the electronic age, participating in humanity's first tentative steps toward the digital future. The machine's ability to process information at previously unimaginable speeds offered glimpses of capabilities that would eventually transform every aspect of human civilization. But in 1944, those broader implications remained secondary to immediate military necessity. Each day brought new intercepts, new challenges, new opportunities to peer into German strategic thinking. The electronic revolution was beginning, but it was beginning in service of a more ancient and fundamental goal: victory in the greatest war humanity had yet fought. As spring turned toward summer and invasion plans reached their final stages, the intelligence flowing from Colossus would prove decisive in ways its creators could barely imagine. Had our faces in the crowd, the faces around the morning briefing table told stories that would never appear in official histories. Joan Clark sat with her characteristic stillness, fingers steepled as she absorbed the overnight intercepts. Her mind worked with the precision of clockwork, but behind those calm eyes lay a complexity that few of her colleagues fully understood. She had arrived at Bletchley not as a mathematician, but as a linguist. The government code and cipher school had recruited her from Cambridge, where she'd been quietly excelling in a field dominated by men who often seemed surprised by her presence. Here, though, competence was the only currency that mattered. When Turing's team needed someone who could think through the logical structures of naval Enigma, Joan's mathematical intuition proved as sharp as any of her male colleagues, but the work extracted its price in ways both obvious and subtle. The obvious costs were physical. 14-hour days became routine. The canteen served meals at odd hours to accommodate the shift patterns, and Joan often found herself eating breakfast at midnight, surrounded by colleagues whose body clocks had been shattered by the demands of round-the-clock cryptanalysis. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams were filled with rotor settings and cipher wheels. The subtle costs ran deeper. Joan's engagement to Turing had ended the previous year, a relationship complicated by factors that neither could discuss openly, even with each other. The secrecy that surrounded their professional lives seemed to seep into everything else. How do you explain to friends why you disappear for months at a time? How do you maintain relationships when you cannot share the work that consumes your every waking moment? Across the table, Dilly Knox presented a different kind of story entirely. At 58, he was among the older hands at Bletchley, a veteran of the Great War's Room 40, where he'd first learned the peculiar satisfaction of reading other people's secrets. Knox had spent decades in this shadow world, watching empires rise and fall through the lens of intercepted communications. His specialty was the Italian diplomatic traffic, and his methods were as much art as science. While the younger mathematicians built mechanical aids and statistical analyses, Knox relied on intuition, honed by 25 years of cryptographic experience. He could sense patterns in ciphertext the way a musician hears harmonies. His breakthroughs came not from systematic analysis, but from sudden flashes of insight that illuminated entire systems. Knox's health was failing, though he tried to hide it from his colleagues. The long hours and constant pressure had taken their toll. But more than that, he carried the weight of knowing too much about human nature. When you spend your career reading other people's private communications, you develop a certain cynicism about the species. Diplomats lie to each other with practiced ease. Military commanders inflate their successes and minimize their failures. Even personal letters reveal the small deceptions that people tell themselves and others. Yet Knox remained at his post, driven by something deeper than duty. He had seen what happened when intelligence failures allowed wars to spiral out of control. Room 40's successes in the previous war had saved countless lives, and Knox understood that the current conflict would be won or lost based on information as much as firepower. In Hut 6, Gordon Welchman had created something unprecedented in military intelligence, a production line for breaking codes. His insight was fundamentally organizational rather than mathematical. While others focused on the theoretical elegance of cryptanalytic techniques, Welchman saw the practical challenge of processing thousands of intercepts daily. His innovation was the traffic analysis system that tracked the patterns of German communications even when the content remained encrypted. By mapping who talked to whom, when, and how often, Welchman's team could deduce German military structure and operational planning without reading a single decoded message. It was intelligence archaeology, reconstructing enemy capabilities from the shadows they cast in the electromagnetic spectrum. But Welchman's greatest contribution was recognizing that code-breaking was ultimately a human enterprise. Machines like the bomb could eliminate impossible rotor settings, but human operators had to recognize the patterns that led to breakthrough moments. He recruited not just mathematicians but linguists, chess players, crossword enthusiasts, anyone whose mind worked in the lateral patterns that cryptanalysis demanded. The human cost of this work showed itself in unexpected ways. Many of the young women recruited as bomb operators developed a peculiar form of mechanical intuition. They could hear when a machine was running properly just from the rhythm of its clicking, and they learned to recognize the subtle changes in sound that indicated a potential breakthrough. Some reported dreaming in the cadence of rotor wheels. These operators worked in windowless rooms surrounded by machines that generated tremendous heat and noise. The work was simultaneously mind-numbing and intensely demanding. Hours of routine checking punctuated by moments of electric excitement when a machine stopped, indicating a possible solution. The operators had to maintain absolute concentration while performing tasks that would drive most people to distraction. Many of them were barely 20 years old, young women who'd been recruited from universities or recommended by professors who recognized their analytical abilities. They lived in cramped quarters in the surrounding villages, cycling to work through the English countryside while carrying secrets that could alter the course of the war. The contrast was surreal. Pastoral beauty surrounding industrial-scale cryptanalysis. Their social lives became casualties of the work. How do you explain to a young man why you can't discuss your job? How do you maintain friendships when half your conversations must remain vague and evasive? Many of the Bletchley staff found themselves drawn into relationships with colleagues, the only people who could understand the peculiar pressures of their shared existence. The marriages that formed at Bletchley were unlike any others. Couples who worked on different projects couldn't discuss their daily challenges with each other. Husbands and wives maintained separate professional secrets even while sharing their most intimate thoughts. Some found this compartmentalization liberating. Others found it isolating beyond endurance. Commander Travis, who'd taken over from Denniston as the park's operational head, understood these human dynamics better than most military administrators. His background was naval intelligence, and he'd learned that successful intelligence operations depended as much on morale as methodology. He instituted small changes that made enormous differences in daily life. The canteen began serving proper tea at all hours. Recreation facilities were expanded to include a small theater where staff could stage amateur productions. Sports leagues were organized, though the schedules had to accommodate the irregular shift patterns that kept the code-breaking operation running continuously. Most importantly, Travis recognized that the staff needed some sense of their work's impact. While operational security prevented detailed briefings about how intelligence was being used, he arranged for occasional visits from military commanders who could thank the codebreakers without revealing specific applications. These brief acknowledgments of their contribution provided psychological sustenance during the darkest periods. The pressure was relentless, but it was pressure with purpose. Every person at Bletchley Park understood that their individual contribution was part of something larger, a collective effort that was literally helping to determine the war's outcome. This shared sense of mission created bonds that would last lifetimes. Late at night, when the day shifts had ended and the skeleton crews took over the most critical operations, small groups would gather in the common areas to decompress. They couldn't discuss their work directly, but they could share the emotional weight of carrying such enormous responsibilities. These informal gatherings became essential to maintaining sanity in an inherently insane situation. The conversations were often about seemingly trivial matters: books they'd read, films they'd seen before the war, memories of peacetime life that seemed increasingly distant. But underneath these surface topics ran deeper currents of mutual support and understanding. These people were living through history, and they were doing it together. Joan Clark would later describe these late-night conversations as among her most treasured memories of the war years. Not the breakthrough moments or the technical achievements, but the simple human connections that sustained them through the endless cycle of intercepts, analysis, and solution. The faces around those tables represented the best of human capability: intelligence, dedication, and quiet courage in service of something greater than themselves. As summer approached and invasion preparations intensified across Britain, these faces would be among the last to know when D-Day was finally launched. Their work would help ensure its success, but they would learn of that success the same way as everyone else, listening to BBC broadcasts while understanding better than most what those reports really meant. The human cost of victory was being paid in increments, one decoded message at a time. The silence after the war. The war ends and Bletchley Park falls silent, its personnel disperse, sworn to secrecy about their wartime activities. The secrets of Bletchley Park remain classified for decades, and the contributions of its codebreakers are largely unacknowledged. We reflect on the impact of Bletchley Park on the war, its role in shortening the conflict and saving countless lives. We consider the legacy of Bletchley Park as a testament to the power of human ingenuity, collaboration, and the importance of protecting freedom and democracy. We end with a sense of quiet gratitude for the unsung heroes of Bletchley Park. By May of 1945, the silence began to settle over Bletchley Park like morning mist across the Buckinghamshire countryside. The machines that had hummed and clicked through countless nights fell still, one by one. The bombs, those mechanical marvels that had torn apart Enigma's secrets, were quietly dismantled, their bronze wheels and rotating drums packed away into wooden crates that would disappear into government warehouses. The great Colossus computers, those towering monuments to electronic innovation, were broken down with methodical precision, their valves and circuits scattered, their revolutionary architecture reduced to anonymous components. The people who had breathed life into these machines began their own quiet dispersal. Joan Clark gathered her few personal belongings from Hut 8, her desk cleared of the mathematical workings that had helped turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic. She would return to Cambridge, to a world where her contributions would remain unspoken for decades. Alan Turing walked the grounds one final time, his brilliant mind already turning toward new challenges in computing and artificial intelligence, yet carrying forever the weight of secrets he could never share. Commander Travis issued the final security briefings with characteristic thoroughness. Each departing member of staff signed additional documents reinforcing their oath of silence. They were reminded that the work they had done at Bletchley Park was to remain classified indefinitely. The Official Secrets Act bound them not just legally, but morally. They had been guardians of knowledge that could reshape the understanding of the war itself, and now they would become guardians of silence. The transformation was remarkably swift. Within months, Bletchley Park began to empty of its wartime urgency. The temporary huts that had housed such extraordinary minds were cleared of their specialized equipment. Filing cabinets that had contained the daily harvest of intercepted communications were sealed and removed. The blackboards where brilliant equations had mapped pathways through seemingly impossible mathematical landscapes were wiped clean, leaving only faint chalk ghosts of the genius that had flourished there. Some personnel found positions in the emerging peacetime intelligence services, their experience with signals intelligence and cryptanalysis proving invaluable in a world where the wartime alliance with the Soviet Union was rapidly cooling into suspicion. Others returned to universities, to teaching positions where they would educate a new generation while carefully omitting the most significant chapter of their own careers. A few, like Gordon Welchman, would eventually emigrate to America, carrying their expertise to new institutions while maintaining their vow of secrecy about the source of their knowledge. The local community of Bletchley watched this exodus with quiet curiosity. For years they had observed the comings and goings at the park, noting the unusual mix of academics, linguists, and young women who had transformed their quiet market town. Now these mysterious residents were departing as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving behind only rumors and speculation about what had really happened behind those guarded gates. The mansion itself stood empty again. Its Victorian rooms that had once echoed with urgent conferences about German naval movements now filled only with the settling sounds of an aging building. The grounds where brilliant minds had walked and talked through complex problems returned to their peacetime quiet. The lake where exhausted codebreakers had found moments of reflection began to attract only local wildlife and the occasional curious visitor. For the veterans of Bletchley Park, the transition to civilian life carried unique challenges. They had been part of something extraordinary, a concentrated effort of human intelligence that had achieved the seemingly impossible, yet they could speak of none of it. At dinner parties and social gatherings, when conversation turned to wartime experiences, they would deflect questions with practiced vagueness. "Oh, I did some clerical work for the government. Nothing very interesting." The weight of unacknowledged achievement settled differently on different people. Some found solace in knowing that their contribution had helped save countless lives, even if that contribution would never be publicly recognized. Others struggled with the isolation that secrecy imposed. They had been part of a community of extraordinary purpose, and now they were scattered individuals carrying private knowledge in a world that could not understand what they had accomplished. Years passed, then decades. The Cold War brought new challenges in signals intelligence, but the lessons learned at Bletchley Park remained locked away in classified files. Academic historians writing about the Second World War worked around significant gaps in the record. They could document the battles and strategies, but the intelligence foundation that had made so many Allied victories possible remained invisible to them. Occasionally, former Bletchley Park personnel would encounter each other in their post-war lives. A chance meeting on a London street or at an academic conference would bring a moment of recognition, a careful exchange of pleasantries that carried deeper meaning. These encounters were treasured, brief connections to a shared experience that could not be discussed but would never be forgotten. The technological legacy of Bletchley Park began to emerge in other forms. The computing innovations pioneered there influenced the development of early commercial computers. Though the connection remained hidden, Turing's work on artificial intelligence drew from insights gained during his cryptanalytical years, though he could never cite his most significant practical experience. The mathematical techniques developed for breaking codes found applications in other fields, their origins obscured by classification. Not until the 1970s did the first authorized revelations begin to emerge. Group Captain Winterbotham's book, The Ultra Secret, provided the first public glimpse into the intelligence war that had been fought in parallel with the conventional conflict. Suddenly, strategic decisions that had puzzled military historians for decades began to make sense. The seemingly prescient Allied responses to German movements were revealed to have been based on precise intelligence rather than fortunate guesswork. As the secrecy gradually lifted, the true scale of Bletchley Park's achievement became apparent. Intelligence historians began to estimate that the code-breaking efforts had shortened the war by perhaps 2 years, saving millions of lives and preventing immeasurable suffering. The Battle of the Atlantic, the North African Campaign, the D-Day landings, all had been influenced by intelligence flowing from those modest huts in Buckinghamshire. The personal stories began to emerge as well. Joan Clark's contributions to naval Enigma were finally acknowledged. Colleen Townsend and the other women who had operated the Colossus computers received recognition for their pioneering work in electronic computing. The brilliant eccentrics, like Dilly Knox, were remembered not just as scholars, but as codebreakers who had helped change the course of history. Today, Bletchley Park stands as a museum, its huts restored and its machines reconstructed. Visitors can walk through the spaces where such momentous work was accomplished. They can see working replicas of the bomb and Colossus, marveling at the ingenuity that created such sophisticated tools from the technology of the 1940s. But perhaps more importantly, they can reflect on the human achievement represented by this place. The legacy extends far beyond the immediate impact on the war. Bletchley Park demonstrated the power of bringing together diverse minds in pursuit of a common goal. Mathematicians worked alongside linguists. Academics collaborated with practical engineers. Theoretical brilliance combined with mechanical ingenuity. The model of intensive, collaborative problem-solving established there would influence everything from corporate research and development to modern cybersecurity efforts. As evening settles over Bletchley Park now, as the last museum visitors depart and quiet returns to the grounds, there is a sense of peaceful completion. The secrets have been revealed, the contributions acknowledged, the sacrifices honored. The men and women who worked there in wartime secrecy have finally received the recognition they deserved. Their story has become part of the historical record, their achievement understood and celebrated. The lake reflects the changing sky, just as it did when weary codebreakers sought moments of tranquility between shifts. The trees rustle with the same gentle sound that once provided background to urgent conversations about cryptanalytical breakthroughs. The buildings stand as monuments not just to technological innovation, but to the power of human intelligence and determination in service of freedom and democracy. And in the gathering twilight, there is a profound sense of gratitude for those unsung heroes who labored in silence, broke seemingly unbreakable codes, shortened a terrible war, and helped preserve the world we know today. Their legacy living on in every peaceful evening, every quiet moment of reflection, every reminder that brilliance and dedication, working together in common cause, can overcome even the greatest challenges and preserve the light of human civilization against the darkest threats.